If I let you stay, you cannot fall in love with me." That was the first thing my landlady said after looking at the eviction notice in my shaking hand. Not hello, not sit down, not why are you at my door in the middle of the night, just that. For a second I honestly thought I had heard her wrong. I stood there staring at Vanessa Gray like my brain had stopped working. She looked calm when she said it too, calm enough to scare me. I remember swallowing hard and asking, "What?" Her eyes stayed on mine, green, steady, unreadable. "I said," she repeated, quieter this time, "if I help you, you cannot mistake kindness for something else. I need that to be clear before you step inside." I should have left right then. Maybe a smarter man would have. Maybe a man with money in his account, food in his fridge, and pride still standing on both feet would have turned around and found a different way to fall apart. But I had an eviction notice in my hand, 3 months of unpaid rent behind me, and exactly 7 days before I lost the only place in this city that still felt like mine. So no, I didn't leave. I stepped inside. My name is James Carter. I was 27 that year, broke enough to count quarters before buying bread, proud enough to pretend I was managing, and stupid enough to think bad luck came in small pieces. It doesn't. It comes all at once. First, the restaurant where I worked shut down with 2 days' notice. One minute I was doing dinner service and joking with the line cooks, and the next minute the owner was standing in the kitchen telling us we were done. No severance. No backup plan, just apologies and locked doors. I told myself it would be temporary. I had kitchen experience. I worked hard. I showed up on time. I knew how to handle pressure, how to move fast, how to build a plate that made people stop talking for 1 second when it hit the table. I thought another place would hire me fast. They didn't. 2 weeks later, my bank account hit zero. A month after that, I started dodging calls from people I owed money to. By month 3, I had sold my watch, skipped meals, and gotten so good at acting normal that even I almost believed it. Then that white envelope showed up under my door. Final notice. Red letters, sharp enough to feel personal, 3 months overdue, 7 days to pay or vacate. I sat on my couch for a long time after reading it, not thinking, not moving, just staring at the wall like it might open up and hand me a solution. It didn't. The truth was simple. I had no one left to ask. My parents were halfway across the country and already worried enough. My friends had helped when they could, but you can only borrow grocery money so many times before your phone starts getting quieter. And I hated that. Hated the silence. Hated the shame. Hated the way need strips pieces off you one by one until even asking for help feels like losing a fight. That should have been the lowest point. It was. The lowest point was standing outside Vanessa Gray's door with that notice in my hand, knowing exactly how pathetic I looked. Vanessa owned the building. She lived in the penthouse upstairs, and in the 2 years I'd rented 3C, I had spoken to her maybe 10 times. Quick hall hellos. One thank you when she held the front door open for me. Once she nodded at me after I fixed the loose railing on the 3rd floor because the super kept ignoring it. That was it. Still, everybody knew who she was. She was the kind of woman who made a hallway feel smaller when she walked through it. Early 30s maybe. Always put together. Always moving like she had somewhere more important to be. She dressed like success came naturally to her and spoke like she had never once been ignored in a room. I had no business knocking on her door, but panic makes rules feel less important, so I went up there. And she opened the door like she had been expecting me. "You're James," she said. Not a question, I nodded. "I'm sorry, I know it's late." Her gaze dropped to the paper in my hand and then came back to my face. "Come in." That was when she said the line about not falling in love with her. And that was when I realized this conversation was not going to go the way I had rehearsed it. Her apartment looked nothing like mine. Bigger, yes. Nicer, obviously. But that wasn't what hit me. What hit me was that it felt lived in. A mug on the counter, open book on the table, laptop still glowing. Shoes kicked off near the couch. She pointed me toward a seat and waited. I handed her the notice because I didn't trust my voice yet. She read it without changing expression. Then she placed it on the table between us and said, "You should have come to me sooner." "I know." Why didn't you? The honest answer came out before I could clean it up, because I thought I could fix it before anybody knew I was failing. Something shifted in her face then, not pity, something quieter. That sounds exhausting, she said. I gave a dry laugh. It is. She leaned back in her chair and studied me for a few seconds that felt much longer. You lost your job 3 months ago. Yes. And since then, I've applied everywhere. Diners, hotels, chains, private kitchens, anywhere with a stove and a payroll. Why food? That caught me off guard. No one had asked me that in weeks. Mostly people asked when I'd get another job or how bad things were or whether I'd considered moving home, not why food. I looked down at my hands. Because when I cook, I'm good at something. Maybe the only thing I've ever been sure about. She went still after that. Then she asked, "Do you want the truth, James?" I almost laughed again. I don't think I'm in a position to ask for anything else. The truth is, I cannot ignore 3 months of unpaid rent. Her tone stayed gentle but firm. If I do it for one tenant, I create a problem with everyone else. Hope rose in me anyway, stupid and desperate. But she noticed, of course she noticed. There is a but, she said. I sat forward. She folded her hands in her lap. I need help, real help. My life is full of things that look small until they pile up. Groceries, meals, organization, errands. 100 pieces of daily life I am too tired to manage well. I frowned. You could hire someone. I could. She held my gaze. But I don't want someone I don't trust in my home. I didn't say anything. My heart had started beating harder, but not because I understood where this was going, because I didn't. She glanced once at the eviction notice, then back at me. I've seen how you move through this building, she said. You help people when no one is watching. You fix things without announcing it. You carry more than your share and make it look accidental. Men like that are rare. Nobody had said anything like that to me in a very long time. I didn't know what to do with it. So I asked the only question that mattered. What are you offering? Her answer came slow, careful. A clean arrangement. You help me here, cooking, errands, a few hours most days, dinner sometimes if I'm working late. She paused, and conversation, honest conversation. I spend too much time around people who want access to me, not time with me. I stared at her. She went on before I could speak. In exchange, I stop the eviction. I forgive the back rent. We start fresh. No debt hanging over your head. No confusion about what this is. My mouth actually went dry. It was too generous, too strange, too easy. And yet it didn't feel dirty. That was the part I couldn't explain. If anything, she sounded like she was setting rules to keep it clean. I don't understand, I admitted. I know. Why me? For the first time that night, she looked away. When she looked back, something in her expression had softened. Because I think you need someone to believe you can stand back up, she said. And I think I need someone in this apartment who knows how to stay human. I didn't know what to say to that. She stood, walked to the kitchen, and opened her fridge. Can you cook? I let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. Yeah, I can cook. Good. She looked over her shoulder at me. Then show me. I followed her into the kitchen with my chest tight and my mind spinning. Chicken, pasta, garlic, spinach, butter, lemon, real ingredients, good pans, sharp knives. For the first time in months, my hands knew exactly what to do. I started chopping. She stayed close, but not too close, leaning against the counter, watching quietly. After a while, she said, "If this works, you stay. If it doesn't, I file the eviction." I stopped moving. There it was, the thread under the kindness, not cruel, just real. I looked up at her. So tonight decides everything. Her face didn't change. No, she said softly. Tonight tells me whether letting you into my life is a mistake. And standing there with a knife in my hand and my future hanging over a pan of sizzling butter, I realized I was no longer just trying to save my apartment. I was trying to survive whatever this woman had just started. But what exactly had she started? I did not plate the food right away. I stood there staring at the pan like it might tell me whether I was saving my life or walking into a mistake I would not be able to undo. Vanessa stayed where she was, one hand resting on the counter behind her, saying nothing. That silence did something to me. It made the room feel smaller, sharper, like every sound mattered. The knife on the board, the butter hissing in the pan, my own breathing. Finally, I said, "You make strange deals." The corner of her mouth moved a little. "And you knock on penthouse doors at 3 in the morning." That was desperation. Most honest things are. I looked at her then, really looked. She did not seem amused, she did not seem flirtatious either. She looked tired, not sleepy, tired in the deeper way. Like someone who had been strong for too long and had gotten used to nobody noticing the cost. That made it harder, not easier. Because if she had seemed cold or manipulative or careless, I could have kept this simple. I could have told myself I was taking a deal from a rich woman and nothing more. A transaction, survival, end of story. But Vanessa did not look like a woman making a game out of me. She looked lonely, and I knew enough about loneliness to recognize it fast. I went back to cooking. Chicken first, then garlic, then lemon, capers, butter, pasta in salted water, spinach at the end so it stayed bright. I moved on instinct, on training, on muscle memory from years in hot kitchens and loud dinner rushes. For 10 minutes I forgot where I was. That was the first dangerous thing about her apartment. Inside that kitchen, with good ingredients and enough space and someone quietly watching me like my hands mattered, I forgot I was a man with an eviction notice in his jacket pocket. I remembered who I used to be before fear made me smaller. When I finally plated everything, I set one dish in front of her and one for myself. She looked down at it and did not speak for a second. Then she asked, "You made this from what I already had?" "Yeah. It smells better than any meal I've bought in the last year." "That might be because you've been buying bad meals." That got a real smile out of her, quick but real. We sat at the small dining table near the windows. City lights burned below us, but I kept my eyes on my food, on my fork, on anything but her face. I did not trust what her expression might do to me. She took one bite and closed her eyes for half a second. That tiny reaction hit me harder than it should have. "This is cruel," she said. I looked up. "Cruel." She nodded, taking another bite. "Because now I know exactly how badly I've been feeding myself." I laughed before I could stop myself. The sound surprised both of us. It had been a while since I laughed naturally. Most days lately, everything funny had felt expensive somehow, like I had no right to it while my life was falling apart. Vanessa looked at me for a second too long after that, not in a bad way, just in a way that made me feel seen. "So," she said, setting down her fork, "tell me the truth." "About what?" "What? How close are you to not making it?" The question went straight through me. No one had asked it that cleanly. People danced around things, asked if I was okay, asked whether I had a plan, asked if I needed anything. But that question was different. It asked for the number beneath the smile, the truth under the pride. I could have lied. I almost did. Then I looked at the notice still sitting on the table nearby, and something in me gave up trying to be impressive. "My fridge is mostly empty," I said. "I've got enough gas in my car for maybe 3 more interviews. My phone bill is due in 4 days. If you had not opened the door tonight, I would have spent the rest of the week pretending I had options." She listened without interrupting. "My parents think I'm doing better than I am," I went on. "My friends helped when they could, but I can feel them pulling back. I don't blame them. Everybody's got their own life." I swallowed hard. "So I guess the truth is pretty close." Her face did not change much, but her hand tightened around her glass. "Thank you for answering honestly," she said. I gave a shrug that felt weak even to me. "You asked honestly." She looked down at her plate, then back up. "Then I'll answer honestly too." Something in her voice made me sit straighter. "I noticed you months ago." I stared at her. She continued like the sentence had not just changed the air between us. "Not in the way you're thinking." She said it carefully. "I noticed that you never made your problems louder than they had to be. You paid rent on time until you couldn't. You never made scenes. You helped other tenants even when you looked exhausted. You carried your own disappointment privately. That sounds unhealthy, not impressive. It sounds disciplined, she said, and sad. I looked away first. Nobody likes having the ugliest parts of them described accurately. She pushed her plate back a little. This arrangement is not charity, James. Then what is it? A trade. Her eyes met mine again. You help me with the parts of life I've let become empty. I help you survive long enough to stand back up. And the rule. What rule? The one at the door. I forced myself to say it, about not falling in love with you. What? A strange look crossed her face, not embarrassment, more like regret. That rule is there because I need boundaries to stay honest, she said. You need housing. I control housing. That already makes this delicate. She paused. I will not use your situation to blur that line. That settled something in me and unsettled something else, because it meant she had thought about the line. It meant she cared where it was. It also meant I had to care too. I nodded slowly. Okay. Okay. Okay, I repeated. If I do this, it stays clean, cooking, errands, meals, conversation. Nothing else gets mixed in. Her expression softened. Good. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt disappointed, which was ridiculous and dangerous and proof that I needed sleep. She stood and carried her plate to the sink. I got up right away to help, but she shook her head. Finish eating. I can clean. I know, she said. That's part of the reason you're here, but tonight I want you to eat while the food is still hot. I sat back down without arguing. That should not have felt intimate, but it did. When I was done, I carried both plates over anyway. She pretended not to notice. We stood side by side at the sink. My shoulder close enough to feel her warmth if I leaned even a little. I kept my body careful, measured, respectful. Still, I could feel how aware I was of her, of the soft smell of her shampoo, of the sound of her bracelet sliding down her wrist when she reached for a glass, of the way silence with her was not empty. It felt loaded. Like the room kept waiting for one of us to say the wrong thing. Instead, she said, "Be here tomorrow at 7:30. I looked at her. For breakfast. Yes. You're deciding fast. I usually do. And if I say no? She dried her hands and turned toward me. Then I file the notice in the morning, and you spend the next 7 days finding another miracle. There it was again, the reality under the softness. But before I could answer, she took one step closer and lowered her voice. I hope you say yes, she said. Not because she needed breakfast, not only because she needed help. She hoped I said yes in a way that sounded personal, and that was the second dangerous thing about Vanessa Gray. Even when she was trying to keep a boundary, she made it feel like an invitation. I nodded. I'll be here. She held my gaze for one long second, then stepped back. Good, I leave for work at 8:30. Coffee first, eggs if you can, and James. Yeah. Do not thank me yet. Her face turned serious again. If this works, it changes things for both of us. I should have asked what she meant. I should have asked what exactly she thought would change. Instead, I let her walk me to the door like I already belonged there a little. My hand was on the knob when she said my name again. I turned. She was standing in the warm light of her apartment, arms loose at her sides, expression impossible to read. You looked relieved when I opened the door tonight, she said softly. That bothered me. I frowned. Why? Because no one should look that relieved just because somebody was kind. I did not know what to do with that, so I said nothing. She opened the door wider. 7:30, she repeated. I stepped into the hallway with my heart beating too hard. The door clicked shut behind me. I stood there for a moment staring at the wood, trying to understand why I suddenly felt less like a man who had been rescued and more like a man who had just agreed to walk into something deeper than he could afford. And when I finally went downstairs, one thought followed me all the way back to 3C. What did Vanessa mean when she said yes would change things for both of us? I barely slept, not because I was scared of oversleeping. Not because of the eviction notice still folded on my table like a threat that had only paused, not disappeared. I barely slept because every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice again. If I let you stay, you cannot fall in love with me. That sentence should have made things clearer. Instead, it made everything worse. Because people do not say things like that unless the danger already exists. I got up before 6, shaved for the first time in days, and changed shirts twice before realizing how stupid that was. I was not going on a date. I was going upstairs to make breakfast so I could keep a roof over my head. That was all. That had to be all. At 7:28, I knocked. Vanessa opened the door almost immediately, like she had been standing near it. This time she was dressed for work. Dark slacks, cream blouse, hair pinned back, no softness in the way she carried herself. She looked expensive, sharp, untouchable. Then she stepped aside and said, "You're early." "By 2 minutes." "That still counts." I walked in and the apartment felt different in daylight. Less mysterious, more dangerous. The windows let in a pale morning glow that made everything look clean and controlled. Her laptop was open on the counter, a legal pad beside it, 2 phones charging, a life in motion. I went straight to the kitchen because it felt safer than standing there looking at her. "You said eggs," I murmured. "Coffee first," she said. I nodded and started the machine she showed me the night before. It hissed to life. I found the eggs, butter, bread, fruit. Her kitchen made sense fast. Everything had a place. Everything was chosen carefully, just like her. "Do you always keep your place this organized?" I asked. "Yes." "You never throw a sweater over a chair and deal with it later?" "No." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." I glanced over at her. She was leaning against the counter across from me, watching my hands. "You keep saying true things too casually," I told her. She gave me the smallest smile. "Maybe you only notice because you're doing the same thing." I cracked eggs into a bowl and whisked harder than necessary. I made scrambled eggs with chives, toast with a little butter and sea salt, and sliced fruit on the side because I found strawberries in her fridge and decided a person living like this should be reminded she was still human enough to eat color in the morning. When I set the plate in front of her, she looked at it like I had done something bigger than cook breakfast. "You made breakfast look like an apology," she said. "For what?" "For the fact that mornings exist." That pulled a laugh out of me. She took a bite and closed her eyes for half a second again. I was starting to think that was the only honest luxury in her day. We ate at the counter, facing the windows, not looking directly at each other much. It felt easier that way. After a few minutes, she asked, "Did you sleep?" "Not really." "Because of money." I should have lied. Instead, I said, "Because of you." The silence that followed was immediate and heavy. I looked down at my coffee. I meant the arrangement. "No," she said quietly, "you didn't." My face got hot. I hated that she noticed everything. I hated it because some part of me liked it too much. She set down her fork. "This is exactly why I gave you that rule." "I know." "Then help me keep it." The words were not harsh. That made them worse. I nodded once. "Right." For a while, only the soft sounds of plates and coffee cups filled the kitchen. Then she stood and picked up her bag. "Come with me," she said. I blinked. "Where?" "To show you something before I leave." "What?" She led me through the apartment, past the living room and down a short hallway I had not seen the night before. At the end was a small room with built-in shelves, a desk, and boxes stacked neatly against one wall. Not a bedroom, more like a private office. She unlocked a cabinet drawer and pulled out a folder. "This," she said, handing it to me, "is the written agreement." I opened it. The first page listed tasks: meal prep, grocery management, light organization, errands as needed, a schedule, terms, clear language, no vague promises, no emotional wording, just structure. She had done this already. Before I knocked, I looked up sharply. "You had this prepared." Her gaze held steady. "Not for you specifically." That answer was too smooth. I said nothing. She looked away first, which told me more than the words had. "I was considering hiring help," she said. I drafted something, then never used it. That might have been true, it also might not have been the whole truth. I kept reading. At the bottom, one line had been added later by hand. This arrangement does not imply personal, romantic, or physical obligation of any kind. I read it twice. When I looked up, Vanessa's expression had changed. Not harder, just more exposed. I needed that in writing, she said. You don't trust me. I'm trying to protect both of us. Something about the way she said both made me stop feeling insulted. I nodded. Fair. Take it with you if you want. Read it again later. If you still agree, sign tonight. I closed the folder. You really thought through every angle. I have to. Because you own the building. Because people rarely believe a woman like me can make a generous decision without some ugly motive hiding under it. She crossed her arms. And because people rarely believe a man in your position can say yes to help without being accused of wanting more. That landed between us hard because it was true. I had thought some version of it myself. Not about her, about me, about what it would look like if anybody knew. A broke tenant spending evenings in his landlady's penthouse, cooking for her, eating with her, laughing with her. It would sound bad from the outside, maybe even from the inside if either of us got careless. I won't make this ugly, I said quietly. Something in her face softened then. I know, she said. That answer did something dangerous to my chest because it was not hopeful, it was certain. She checked the time, took a breath, and shifted back into work mode so fast it almost felt cruel. I need to leave in 10 minutes, she said. There's cash in the blue envelope by the fruit bowl for groceries. I've listed a few things I need. You don't have to stay all day. Shop, prep dinner ingredients, organize the pantry if you have time. Okay. She hesitated. Then she stepped past me toward the door, stopped, and turned back. One more thing. Yeah. If anyone asks, you're helping me temporarily with food and errands because I'm overloaded with work. That part's true. Yes, her eyes stayed on mine. But people enjoy making true things sound dirty. Keep your answers simple. I swallowed. Has that happened before? A strange expression crossed her face. Not like this, she said. Before I could ask what that meant, she left. The apartment went quiet in a way that almost felt personal. I stood there alone in her office holding the folder and trying not to read meaning into the fact that she had created an agreement formal enough to protect me, but careful enough to protect herself too. The problem was not the document. The problem was the handwritten line. She had added it after last night. Which meant I was not the only one who thought the danger had already started. I spent the next few hours doing exactly what she asked. I went to the grocery store with her list and found myself choosing a few extra things I thought she might like. Fresh basil, better bread, blood oranges because they looked too bright to ignore. I came back, stocked the kitchen, labeled containers, cleaned out a shelf in her fridge that had become a graveyard of sauces and forgotten takeout boxes. Then I started dinner prep. Chicken thighs marinating, potatoes parboiled, green beans trimmed. A small apple tart because I found flour, butter, and enough apples to make something warm. I worked carefully, respectfully, but the longer I stayed, the more I noticed signs of her everywhere. The book face down on the couch, a pair of reading glasses near the window, a half-finished note written in fast, neat handwriting. A photo in a silver frame on a shelf. Vanessa younger, maybe early 20s, standing beside a man in a dark coat with the same eyes she had. Her father, I guessed. There was no one else in the picture. I should not have felt sad looking at it, but I did. By the time she came home, it was just after 7. I heard her key in the lock and looked up from the stove. She stepped inside, kicked off her heels with a tired sigh, then froze. The apartment smelled like garlic, butter, rosemary, and baked apples. For the first time since I met her, Vanessa looked undone. Not messy, not weak, just undone in some place she usually kept locked. You cooked dessert, she said softly. You look like you had a bad day. That obvious. Only to someone with eyes. She let out a tired breath that almost turned into a laugh. Then she saw the signed agreement sitting on the counter. Her expression sharpened. You read it. Twice. And I slid it toward her. I signed it. She stared at my signature for a second longer than needed. Then she asked, "Why?" I frowned because I need this. That's not the answer I'm asking for. I did not know why, but I answered honestly anyway. Because the way you wrote it made me feel safe. The room went still. Vanessa looked at me like I had said something far more intimate than I meant to. Then very quietly she asked, "Do you know how long it's been since someone said that to me?" I shook my head. She gave one small nod like she had expected that. Then she placed the agreement down, looked at the food, looked at me, and said the words that changed the whole shape of the night. "James, if this starts to matter to you, you have to tell me before it destroys us." I felt my pulse jump, because that was not the kind of warning people gave when they felt nothing. So I asked the question I had been trying not to ask all day. How could it destroy us if it means nothing to you? Vanessa did not answer right away. She stood across from me in the warm light of her kitchen with my signed agreement under one hand and dinner waiting on the stove, and for the first time since I had met her, she looked cornered. Not angry, not cold, cornered. That did something dangerous to me, because a woman like Vanessa Gray was not supposed to look uncertain. She was supposed to know exactly where every line was and how close she could stand to it without getting burned. Instead, she looked at me like I had just asked the one question she had been trying hardest not to hear. How could it destroy us if it means nothing to you? The words hung there between us. Finally, she reached past me, turned the flame down under the pan and said very softly, "Sit down." "That's not an answer." "No," she said. "It's me trying to give you one without saying it badly." I pulled out a chair, but I did not sit all the way back. My body stayed tense, ready. I hated that feeling. Hated how quickly she could make me feel like my entire future was hiding inside the next sentence out of her mouth. Vanessa sat across from me, folded her hands together, then unfolded them again. "That warning," she said, "wasn't about you alone." I did not breathe for a second. Then who was it about? "Both of us." The room seemed to go quieter around that. She glanced toward the windows, then back at me, like she was buying herself one more second before choosing honesty. "I made the rule because I knew attraction could become part of this," she said. "I did not expect it to happen this fast." My chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. Fast for who? Her mouth moved like she almost smiled, but there was nothing light in it. "For me," she said. "Which is exactly why I do not trust it yet." That should have calmed me. It did the opposite, because now it was real, not imagined, not one-sided, not me being broke and lonely and stupid enough to mistake attention for rescue. It was real, and she was scared of it. I leaned back slowly, trying to get my heartbeat under control. "So when you said don't fall in love with me, I meant don't let this become something that traps you." "Traps me?" Yes, her eyes held mine. "You needed help. I had the power to give it. That matters. It has to matter." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her I knew my own mind, that I was not some confused kid dazzled by a rich woman in a penthouse. But the truth was uglier than that. The truth was she was right to care, right to question it, right to protect the line, because if she did not, the whole thing could turn into something rotten without either of us meaning it to. So instead I asked, "And what about you?" Her expression shifted. "What about me?" "You said attraction became part of this." I kept my voice level, though it was not easy. "Are you trapped too?" She looked away. That answer landed harder than words. After a moment she stood and carried the plates to the table. "Dinner is getting cold." I stayed where I was. "Vanessa." She stopped. Then she turned back and said the truest thing she had said yet. "Yes, that's why this scares me." I did not know whether to feel relieved or wrecked. Maybe both. We ate in silence at first. Not because it was awkward, because it was not. That was the problem. Even after what she admitted, even with tension hanging between us so thick it felt physical, eating dinner with her still felt natural. like some part of me had stopped asking permission to want this. She took a bite of the chicken and looked down at her plate for a second. "This is unfair," she murmured. "You said that about the first meal. Because you keep cooking like a man trying to ruin all other food for me." That got a small laugh out of me, but it faded fast. "Why did you really prepare that agreement before I signed it?" I asked. She set down her fork carefully, because I needed proof. Of what? That I wasn't creating a situation I could abuse. I stared at her. "You really think you would do that?" "No," she met my eyes. "But I think the world would assume I could, and sometimes that becomes enough." There it was, the part underneath all of this. Not just caution, reputation, power, optics. The ugly way other people could turn a private truth into a public accusation. I thought about the building, the tenants. The fact that she owned all our homes. I thought about how it would sound if anyone knew I was upstairs almost every day, cooking for her, eating with her, laughing with her late into the evening. It would not sound equal. It would sound suspect. And the worst part was that some of that suspicion would be fair. Not because she had done anything wrong, because people do get hurt in situations like this. "I hate that they'd turn it into something ugly," I said. She gave a sad smile. "That makes two of us." Dinner should have ended there, a clean meal, a few careful truths. Then I should have gone downstairs and let distance do its job. Instead, she asked if I wanted tea. I said yes. Then we ended up at the windows again, cups warm in our hands, the city spread below us like another life neither of us was currently living. She had taken her hair down. That small change should not have mattered. It did. "You know what the worst part is?" she said after a while. "What?" "I was lonely before you knocked on my door. Very lonely." Her voice stayed calm, but there was something raw under it now. I had convinced myself that was just adulthood, work, responsibility. You become useful instead of known. I turned to look at her fully. She kept watching the glass. "And then you showed up," she went on, terrified, humiliated, trying so hard to ask with dignity that it broke my heart a little. I swallowed hard. "You barely knew me." She nodded once. That should have protected me. There it was again, that dangerous honesty. My tea had gone warm in my hands, but I could barely feel the cup anymore. "I didn't ask for this to get complicated," she said. "I know. And I do not want to be the woman who confuses rescue with intimacy." I stepped closer, but not too close. Careful, maybe it's not rescue. Her eyes finally lifted to mine. "Then what is it?" I could have lied then, could have said timing, stress, proximity, gratitude, but I was tired of safe lies. "It's the first time in months I don't feel invisible," I said. The words changed her face, not because they were dramatic, because they were true. She set her cup down on the table by the window and took a slow breath. "That is exactly why this is dangerous." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You keep using that word like it's supposed to help. It's supposed to slow us down. Is it working?" Her silence answered that too. For one long second nobody moved. Then her phone rang. The sound cracked the room open. She stepped away first, grabbed the phone from the counter and glanced at the screen. Everything about her changed in an instant. Her posture, her face, her voice. "Hello." I had never seen her become formal so fast. She listened, said almost nothing, then ended the call and looked at me with a tightness in her jaw I had not seen before. "What happened?" "That was Elena Chun." "Who?" "Head of the Building Advisory Board." I frowned. "There's a board." "There's always a board." She set the phone down too carefully. "And Elena never calls this late unless she wants something." The air changed again. "How does that affect me?" She did not answer immediately, and that was answer enough to put ice in my stomach. Finally she said, "One of the tenants mentioned that I've had help in the penthouse lately." I stared at her. "She asked questions," Vanessa continued. "Who you are, how often you're here, whether it's a paid arrangement or something informal." My chest went tight. "And what did you tell her?" "The truth, That you're helping temporarily with meals and errands because I'm overloaded." Did she believe you? Vanessa gave a short, humorless laugh. Eleanor believes what helps her. Why would she care? Because people like her confuse oversight with ownership. She crossed her arms. And because this building comes with rules, policies, ethics standards, most of them sensible, some of them old enough to be stupid. I set my cup down. What kind of rules? She looked at me then, really looked, and I knew before she spoke that I was not going to like the answer. The kind that would make this very complicated if anyone thought boundaries were being blurred. I went still. Blurred how? What? She held my gaze for one painful second before saying it. Landlord and tenant relationships. The room did not just go quiet, it dropped. Everything inside me tightened at once. I thought about the agreement on the counter, the handwritten line, the warning at the door, her fear, her restraint, her refusal to let even one careless thing happen. Now it all made sense, not just morally, legally, socially, publicly. This was not just risky because it could hurt us. It could destroy her. And suddenly all I could think was one brutal question. Had she known from the beginning that wanting me might cost her everything? Had she known from the beginning that wanting me might cost her everything? The question hit so hard I could barely breathe around it. Vanessa must have seen it on my face because she moved first. Not toward me, away. She picked up her tea again even though it had already gone cold, like she needed something to hold while the room changed around us. "Yes," she said, just that, no excuse, no delay, no softer version. "Yes." I stared at her. "You knew." "I knew the risk existed." "And you still opened the door." Her hand tightened around the cup. "Yes." A strange laugh came out of me. Not because anything was funny, because sometimes your body has nowhere else to put shock. So that line at the door wasn't just dramatic. No, it was a warning. Yes. To me or to yourself. Her eyes met mine and did not move. Both. The honesty in that should have helped. It did. It only made the whole thing feel bigger, more real, more dangerous, because now I could see the shape of it clearly. She had let me in knowing exactly what line stood under us, knowing what people would say if they ever looked too closely, knowing how fast kindness could be twisted into coercion. And still she let me in. I walked away from the window and dragged a hand over my face. This is insane. I know. You should have told me last night. I almost did. Almost isn't the same thing. No, her voice stayed steady, but just barely. It is. I turned back to her. Then why didn't you? For the first time that evening she looked angry, not at me, at herself. Because I was tired, she said. Because you looked like one more bad answer might break you. Because I wanted 1 hour of helping you before the world had a chance to poison it. That shut me up. She set the cup down so carefully it made my chest hurt. I am not proud of the timing, she continued, but I am also not sorry I helped you. Something about that line stayed with me. Not sorry I helped you. Not sorry I wanted to. Not sorry you were here. I took a breath. Tell me exactly how bad it is. Vanessa nodded once like she had expected that. The board does not control my private life, she said, but they oversee building ethics, tenant disputes, owner conduct. Most of the time it is boring paperwork and people complaining about noise. She folded her arms. But if anyone believes I'm using my position over a tenant to create a personal relationship, it becomes serious. Serious how? They could force a formal review. They could demand outside oversight. They could make my life difficult enough that I lose credibility with investors and partners. She paused. And if it looked exploitative, even if it wasn't, it could follow me for years. I swallowed hard, because that part I understood. Reputation is just another kind of rent. Miss too many payments and eventually no one opens the door. And Eleanor wants that, I said. She wants leverage, Vanessa corrected. She's wanted this building for 2 years. If I look irresponsible, she wins. I stared at the floor for a second. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding since the second she told me there was a board. What happens if people think there's already something between us? Her silence came too fast. I looked up sharply. Vanessa. She closed her eyes for half a second. Then I have to prove there is. The words landed like a slap. And how do you do that? Her voice dropped. Distance. I laughed again, harsher this time. Of course. James. No, it makes sense. I nodded like I was helping her. Keep the arrangement, keep the meals, keep it professional, smile less, look at me less. Pretend the air doesn't change when we're in the same room. That is not fair. No, I took one step back because suddenly standing too close to her hurt. Then tell me the fair version. The room went quiet again. She did not have one. That was the worst part. Not that she was cruel, not that she was choosing herself. It was that she was right and I hated her for being right for about 3 full seconds before I hated myself instead. Because she had not done this. The building had. The rules had. People had. Still, pain does not care who deserves the blame. It just wants somewhere to land. I sat down on the couch before my legs could betray how shaky they felt. Vanessa stayed standing for a moment, then came over and sat in the chair across from me. Not beside me, across, a measured distance. That hurt too. I need you to hear this clearly, she said. Nothing inappropriate has happened. I looked up. Her face had gone calm in that way people get when they are trying very hard not to fall apart. I have not touched you in a way I shouldn't, she said. I have not asked anything from you outside the agreement. I have not crossed a line. Then why does this feel like we already did? The words came out before I could stop them. Her throat moved. Because feelings are not clean just because behavior is. Neither of us spoke after that. Outside, the city kept moving like it had no idea 2 people were quietly getting wrecked in a penthouse kitchen over nothing anyone could actually photograph. Then she said, "There's more." I almost laughed again. That sentence has never improved a night. Her mouth moved a little, but she didn't smile. Alina is calling a tenant gathering on Friday. My stomach dropped. Why? She says she wants to review temporary vendor access to private units. Vanessa looked tired suddenly, older somehow, which means she wants an excuse to ask questions with an audience. When is Friday? 2 days. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. So what? I just stopped coming up here. Her answer took too long. If we want to make this disappear, yes. The room went cold. Make this disappear. Not slow it down, not protect it. Disappear. I looked at her, really looked, at the tension in her jaw, at the shine in her eyes she was trying to hide, at the way her hands were clasped too tightly in her lap. Is that what you want? I asked. Her voice almost failed on the first word. No. I closed my eyes for a second. That made it worse. If she had said yes, I could have hated her. I could have walked out, eaten the hurt, and turned the whole thing into a lesson about power and timing and rich people with soft voices. But she said no. So the truth stayed unbearable. She wanted this. So did I, and the world had arrived too early. What do we do then? I asked quietly. Vanessa looked at me for a long moment before standing again. She walked to the shelf near the hallway and picked up the silver frame I had noticed earlier. She brought it over and handed it to me. The photo was the same one I had seen. Vanessa younger, her father beside her, same eyes, same careful posture. He bought this building when I was still in college, she said. He said property was safer than people, because at least buildings tell you when they're breaking. I looked up at her. He left me this place when he died, she continued, not as a gift, as a test, to see whether I could carry something heavy without asking for help. That's a hell of a gift. Yes, her voice turned almost dry. My father had many emotional limitations. Despite everything, I smiled a little. She sat on the arm of the chair, not close enough to touch me. When you knocked on my door that night, do you know what I had been doing? I shook my head, arguing with my accountant. He was telling me to sell the building, telling me it was too much work, too much pressure, too many small problems draining time from bigger deals. She looked down at the photograph, then at me. He said I was wasting my life taking care of a place full of people who would never care about me back. I held the frame more carefully. And then you knocked, she said. The room felt very still. You stood in my doorway trying so hard to stay dignified while your whole life was collapsing. Her voice softened, and instead of thinking, here is another burden, all I could think was, thank God someone else in this building still feels real. I could not speak. She let the silence sit there. Then she added, that is why this is not simple for me. 1,000 answers crowded my throat and none of them felt safe. So I asked the only one that mattered. If Friday forces your hand, what happens to us? Her face changed again. That tiny fracture, that tiny truth, she had thought about it already. I end the arrangement, she said softly, publicly. My grip tightened on the frame, and privately. She held my gaze. Her next words were barely above a whisper. Privately, I don't know how. The honesty in that almost undid me. I stood up too fast, walked to the window, and pressed a hand to the glass. It was cool against my skin, steady, useful, unlike me. Behind me, Vanessa said my name once, just once. Not enough to stop me, enough to break me a little. I should go, I said. You just got here. No, I shook my head. I got here 2 days ago, and now my life feels like it belongs to a conversation nobody else has even had. She took that without defending herself. That hurt too. I turned around slowly. Tell me one thing honestly before I leave. I've been honest. I know, that's why I'm asking. She waited. I swallowed once. If there were no board, no building, no power problem, no rules, would you still want me here? For the first time all night, she moved toward me without thinking. One step, then another. She stopped close enough that I could see exactly where she'd bitten the inside of her lip. Yes, she said. No hesitation, no caution, no polished language, just yes. My chest tightened so hard it almost felt like relief. Then she ruined me completely by adding, that's why I can't afford to be careless. Neither of us moved. The city lights reflected around us in the glass. 2 people standing far too close to a line they were trying not to cross. Then she did something small that felt bigger than any kiss could have. She reached up and fixed my collar, just that. One quiet touch at the edge of my shirt. 2 careful fingers, gone almost immediately, but in that 1 second her hand trembled, and that was worse. Because now I knew for certain I was not the only one barely holding still. I stepped back first, not because I wanted to. Because if I didn't, I was not sure I could stop myself from reaching for her. And if I reach for her now, with Friday coming, with rules and eyes and consequences already circling, then everything she had protected would mean nothing. So I nodded once, set the photograph back on the shelf, and headed for the door. My hand was on the knob when she said, very quietly, James. I turned. She was standing in the middle of the room, arms at her sides, looking less like the owner of the whole building and more like a woman about to lose something before she had fully held it. If Friday goes badly, she said, promise me you won't beg me to choose between you and the building. The request hit hard because it revealed the thing she feared most, not scandal, loss, sacrifice. I stared at her for a second too long. Then I answered with the only truth I had. I won't beg, I said, but I also won't pretend that not choosing still won't choose. Her face changed, a small, sharp wound of understanding. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Behind me I heard nothing, no footsteps, no goodbye. Just silence, and somehow that was worse than if she had asked me to stay, because now all I could think was this. When Friday came, would she protect her life? Or fight for what had started between us before either of us had the chance to name it? Friday felt longer than the rest of my life put together. I went to my interview that morning at a restaurant called Marco's and answered questions like a man whose body had shown up but whose mind was still standing in a penthouse doorway hearing a woman ask him not to make her choose. The chef liked me, said I moved well, said I talked about food like it mattered. I should have felt something when he offered me a trial shift starting Monday. Instead, the first thought in my head was simple and brutal. If I get this job, I won't need Vanessa anymore. And the second thought was worse. That was never the part I was afraid of losing. By 6:30 that evening, every tenant in the building seemed to be drifting toward the community room downstairs. Doors opened. Voices carried. Shoes crossed the hall outside my apartment. I stood in 3C buttoning a clean shirt with hands that would not stay steady. At 6:45, there was a knock on my door. For one insane second, I thought maybe it was her. It was. It was Mrs. Rodriguez from 2B. She was holding a small covered dish and looking at me with the kind of sad kindness older women get when they already know more than they should. "I made rice pudding," she said. "For later. Meetings like this make people stupid." Despite everything, I almost smiled. "Thank you." She lowered her voice. "That woman upstairs has always carried too much alone." I looked at her sharply. Mrs. Rodriguez just patted my arm once. "Be careful what silence lets other people decide." Then she walked away before I could ask what she meant. At 7, the room was full, too full. Tenants along the walls, folding chairs occupied, murmurs bouncing off the cheap paint and low ceiling. At the front stood a leaner chun in a navy suit that looked expensive enough to make cruelty seem organized. And beside her, Vanessa, she wore black. Of course she did, clean lines. Hair pinned back, face unreadable. But I knew her better now. I could see the strain in the stillness. Alina started with policy language. Temporary service access, resident security, owner conduct, building standards. Every sentence was technically neutral and emotionally poisonous. Then she shifted. "As many of you have noticed," she said, "there has been unusual private access to the penthouse by one tenant in particular. Because this building has a duty to protect residents from blurred power dynamics, questions have been raised." The room changed. Not loudly, just enough. Bodies leaned in. Eyes moved. The kind of attention that already thinks it knows the story. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Alina continued, "No accusations are being made tonight, but transparency matters. When housing, money, and personal access overlap, the board must review whether ethical boundaries are being preserved." I looked at Vanessa. She had not moved, not 1 inch, but I knew she was about to be asked to do exactly what she feared most: distance me, neutralize me, turn whatever this was into paperwork. Alina turned toward her. "Ms. Gray, would you like to clarify the nature of the arrangement with Mr. Carter?" Every sound in the room seemed to disappear. Vanessa stepped forward. For 1 second I thought she looked at me. Then I realized she wasn't looking at me. She was choosing something. "I would," she said. Her voice came out calm, clear, beautifully controlled. "It is true that Mr. Carter has been assisting me temporarily with meals and household errands during an unusually demanding work period. That arrangement was documented in writing before it began." A few whispers, not many. Alina nodded. "And was rent relief offered as part of this?" Vanessa answered without hesitation. "Yes, temporary relief tied to documented services rendered." That caused more reaction. I could feel the room turning, not because she had done something wrong, because now it sounded transactional enough to be suspicious and personal enough to be dangerous. Alina let the silence work for her. Then she asked the question, "And can you state clearly for the residents here that no personal relationship exists between you and this tenant?" There it was, the knife, the clean lie that would save her, or the truth that could ruin everything. I watched Vanessa's face and knew instantly that she was not prepared for how much that question was going to cost. Her mouth parted, closed. For the first time since I met her, she looked almost young, not in age, in pain, and then I understood something all at once. If she lied now, she could protect the building, maybe even protect me, but something in her would break. Before I could think better of it, I stood, every head turned toward me. "James," Alina said sharply, "this is not your floor." "No," I said, surprised by how steady I sounded. "But you're talking about me like I'm a legal risk instead of a person, so I'm going to speak." Vanessa's eyes locked on mine. There was fear in them, not because I stood up, because she knew I might make this harder, maybe impossible. I took a breath. Then I said the one thing that had been true from the start. She never touched me inappropriately. She never asked me for anything outside the agreement. She put boundaries in writing before I signed anything. The first rule she gave me was not to confuse help with romance. The room stayed silent. I kept going. She protected me more carefully than any of you are doing right now. Alina's expression tightened. That does not address the issue of whether feelings developed under unequal conditions. No, I said, it addresses character. She opened her mouth again, but I turned toward the room. Most of you know me, I said. Maybe not well, but enough. You know I'm not reckless. You know I don't make scenes. You know I fell behind after losing my job. And you know she could have evicted me without ever opening her door. Mrs. Rodriguez lowered her eyes. Mr. Peterson folded his arms and looked suddenly uncomfortable. I looked back at Alina. If your concern is power, then fine. Let's talk about power honestly. The problem is not that Vanessa used hers. The problem is that everyone here assumes a woman with property and a man with less of it cannot possibly meet each other cleanly. Alina's face hardened. This is exactly why policy exists. Policy exists to stop abuse, I said, not to criminalize decency before anything wrong has happened. I could feel my pulse in my throat, feel Vanessa watching me, feel the whole room waiting. Then I did the only thing that made sense. I took the folded paper from my pocket, the one Marco's chef had signed an hour earlier. I got hired today, I said. Full-time line position. I start Monday. Something shifted in the room, not enough, but some. I turned fully toward Vanessa then. Maybe I should not have done it in public. Maybe it was the wrong time. But we were already past the point where safe things mattered more than true ones. My situation is changing, I said, fast, and if the only thing standing between ethics and scandal is dependency, then I can remove that. Vanessa went still. I kept my eyes on her. You asked me not to beg you to choose between me and the building. Her throat moved. So I'm not asking that, I said. Every word felt like it was costing skin. I'm choosing first. The room looked confused. Vanessa did not. She knew exactly what I meant before I said it. I'll leave the arrangement tonight, I said. No more rent relief. No more service exchange. No reason for anyone in this room to say I need her to survive. The silence turned enormous. It hurt to say it. It hurt because I had just cut away the excuse that brought me to her. It hurt because I did not know whether anything would still be standing underneath it. But truth has a strange kind of peace inside it, even when it bleeds. Alina recovered first. That is a practical step, but it still does not answer whether a conflict already exists. Before I could speak again, Vanessa finally moved. Enough. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The whole room quieted on instinct. She stepped forward and something about her had changed, not softened, settled. I have listened to policy language for 20 minutes, she said. And not once has anyone here acknowledged the actual care with which this arrangement was structured. Not once has anyone asked whether Mr. Carter was respected, protected, given room to say no. Alina tried to interrupt. Vanessa did not let her. You want transparency, she said. Fine, here is mine. I did everything in my power to keep this ethical. I set boundaries before he crossed my threshold. I documented the work. I kept my hands to myself. I told myself restraint would make this simple. Her voice thinned for 1 second, then strengthened. It did not. A ripple moved through the room. I could barely breathe now. Vanessa looked straight at Alina. If your review is about whether I abused power, the answer is no. If your review is about whether feelings can still exist when people behave honorably, then I'm afraid your bylaws are too small for real life. No one moved. No one even whispered. Then she turned to me, not to the room, to me, and in front of everyone with her whole reputation standing on one side and the truth on the other, she chose. "James," she said softly, "if you walk away from the arrangement tonight, I will respect it." My chest tightened, but I need one thing said clearly before you do. The room vanished. There was only her, only this, only the moment where a life either closes or opens. Her eyes held mine. "I did not help you because I pitied you," she said. "I helped you because the second you stood in my doorway, I knew losing you would matter." The air left my lungs. Someone in the back inhaled sharply. I did not care. Vanessa took one more step. "So yes," she said, her voice steady now. "There are feelings, real ones, unwanted at first, inconvenient from the beginning, but real. And if that truth offends policy more than dishonesty would, then the policy should be ashamed of itself." Nobody spoke. Alina looked furious. I barely noticed, because the only thing I could see was Vanessa standing there, having just burned through every safe option she had left for me. Not because I asked, because she chose. I crossed the room before I could stop myself. Stopped just in front of her, close enough to feel the heat of her. Not touching, not yet. "You said not to beg," I murmured. Her eyes filled, but she smiled anyway. "You didn't. Good." I reached into my pocket, pulled out the apartment key to 3C, and placed it in her hand. A few people gasped at the symbolism, even if they didn't understand the details. "I'll take the job," I said. "I'll find somewhere else to live if I have to. I'll remove every doubt anyone can name, but I'm not walking out of your life to make cruel people comfortable." A tear slipped down her cheek. She laughed once through it. "That is an unbelievably stubborn thing to say. It's the truest thing I've got." And then, because the room had already seen the truth, and because I was done letting fear speak louder than we did, I took her hand. Just her hand. Nothing reckless. Nothing hidden. Everything clear. The meeting ended in noise after that. Debate. Objections. Counter-arguments. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke up. Then Mr. Peterson. Then two others. Enough people had seen enough kindness from both of us that Alina could not keep the room on one side anymore. The review was postponed. The arrangement ended. The question of us did not. 3 months later, I was still at Marco's, promoted faster than I expected, saving money, working brutal hours and loving every second of it. Vanessa hired a property manager for direct tenant matters and stepped back from the daily overlap that had made everything so fragile. Clean lines, clear ethics, no shadows in us. We started over on purpose. No secret arrangement, no dependency, no borrowed reason to be in each other's lives, just dinner, phone calls, long walks, truth. The first time she came to my new apartment across town, she stood in the doorway smiling like she knew exactly what the moment meant. No power, no leverage, just choice. A year later, I gave her a key, not because she needed access, because I wanted her to know there would always be a door she never had to knock on. Some people think love begins with grand gestures. They're wrong. Love begins the moment someone could hold power over you and chooses instead to hold you with care. He stayed honest. She stayed brave, and that changed everything.